Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Venerable. We can get started whenever you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I thought to start today with some meditation related to what we were looking at last week, the topic of refuge. So, first of all, make yourselves comfortable. Try to sit in a good position for meditation, which mainly means keeping the back straight. You can have your eyes closed all the way or left open a little bit so there's some light coming in. Hands resting in the lap. The Tibetan way is to have the right hand on top of the left with the two thumbs touching above the palms of the hands. And make sure your shoulders are relaxed. Try not to have them hunched and tight. And just let your breathing flow in and out in a natural rhythm without controlling the breath. Just let the body breathe naturally. And let your mind settle down. If there are any thoughts in your mind from what you were doing earlier this morning or yesterday or any time in the past, let those thoughts go, put them aside for now. And do the same with any thoughts about what you're going to do later today or tomorrow or any time in the future. So just let your mind, your awareness be in the present, right here, right now, wherever you are. And just for a few moments, be aware of the breathing flowing in and out. That helps the mind to settle down. Now imagine in this space in front of you, the Buddha. Visualize him about the level of your forehead and a few feet away. And he's made of light, but three-dimensional, not flat like a painting. And he's sitting on a seat consisting of a lotus with the petals open out and flat. And on that are two discs representing the sun and the moon. And he's sitting in the full lotus position, wearing the robes of a monk, saffron colored. His left hand is resting in his lap, holding a bowl, an alms bowl, and it's filled with nectar that heals our afflictions, all our suffering. His right hand is resting on his right knee, with the palm on the knee and the fingers pointing downwards, actually touching the seat beneath him. His face is peaceful and smiling, with an expression of compassion and love, complete acceptance forgiveness towards you and all other living beings. So just do the best you can to visualize the Buddha, and don't worry if you're not able to visualize clearly with all the details, or even if you can't visualize at all. Try to at least feel that the Buddha is there in the space in front of you, made of light, full of all these wonderful qualities. Perfect, unconditional love and compassion for every being throughout the universe, completely dedicated to helping each and every living being to be free of suffering and to actualize our potential for enlightenment. And he is able to help us because he himself found a way to emerge from suffering and its causes and to reach the state of enlightenment. So he knows how to do that, and he can teach us, and he wants to teach us. He's completely dedicated to doing just that. So try to get a sense of how the Buddha is someone you can rely on in order to be free of suffering, both physical and mental suffering and problems, and the very causes of suffering, the afflictive emotions and karma within our minds. And now contemplate this uncertainty of the situation that we are in. We are now alive, but our life will not last forever. It's going to come to an end at some point, and we don't know when that will be. We have a certain amount of time to live, and that time is getting shorter all the time. With each second, minute, hour, day, month, year. So time is always passing, and we are getting closer and closer to the end of our life. And what happens then? What happens after we die? So we can't know for sure. Buddhism and many other religions, most religions in fact, say there is an afterlife. We don't just completely go out of existence. And normally we like pleasant experiences. We don't like painful, unpleasant experiences. So it's only natural that after this life ends, we would like pleasant rather than unpleasant experiences. Can you be sure that that's what will happen? Is it something you have choice or control over? So if you feel unsure about that and you think maybe you don't have a choice, you don't have control, and if you feel the need for help, the Buddha is someone who can help us. So one way he can help is that if we think of him, bring him to mind, feel his presence, and ask for his help. And you don't have to do this with specific prayers. You can just do it in your own way, with your own words, your own thoughts. So just doing that can help the mind to become more calm and clear, and more courageous, and better able to help us get through difficulties, both during our life when we face difficulties, but also at the end of our life when we're leaving everything behind and going to an unknown destination. It is said in the teachings that if we can think of Buddha and take refuge in the Buddha as we are dying, then it's definite that we will not go to an unfortunate rebirth. But to be able to do that at the time of death, we need to start practicing it now while we're alive. Make ourselves familiar with this practice of thinking of the Buddha and taking refuge in the Buddha. So see if that sounds like something you would like to do. You would like to put more time and energy into practicing and getting familiar with. So we haven't yet started doing prayers. It's the custom in Buddhist centers to do prayers such as taking refuge in the Buddha and generating altruistic intention. So we'll start doing that next time. This is the last class for this period of time, and then we have a break until July. So when we start again in July, we can start doing the prayers of refuge and bodhicitta. Those who wish to, of course, it's not obligatory, but if you'd like to recite those prayers, you can. And another prayer that's often done before teachings is the prayer of the 4 immeasurable thoughts. These are 4 positive states of mind: love or loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And getting familiar with those states of mind is also a very helpful thing to do in preparation for death and dying, because if we can have in our mind positive qualities like that, love and compassion and so on, rather than fear and anger and attachment, then that's also very helpful for our mind as we die and go to the next life. So we'll talk more about that next time when we start again in July. Okay, so in actual fact, it isn't absolutely necessary to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in order to avoid an unfortunate rebirth in the next life. because people who follow other religions, Christians and Jews and Islam, Muslims and so on, they don't take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but they have their own comparable practices. And if they are living a good life, creating virtue and avoiding non-virtue as much as possible, then they too can have a fortunate rebirth in the next life, although they call it heaven, something like that. So yeah, taking refuge in the three jewels isn't the most essential thing. The most essential thing is living a good life. And so this is the topic we're going to be talking about today, karma. So this is the Buddhist explanation of how to live a good life, how to create virtue, good deeds, and how to avoid non-virtue, bad deeds. So it's a very complex subject, and we don't have time to go into every single detail, but we'll cover the main points, and I'll point you to some other resources where you can learn more. Okay, so could we have the slides? Okay, so next one. This is a quotation from the Buddha. So the Buddha talked a lot about karma. So this is one quotation. This is from the Pali Canon. It says, beings are the owners of their kama. That's the Pali version of karma. Kama. Heirs of their kama. They originate from their kama, are bound to their karma, have their karma as their refuge. It is karma that distinguishes beings as inferior and superior. So this is talking about ordinary beings, sentient beings, not enlightened beings. Oh, not yet. Sorry, go back. Yeah, so ordinary beings are still subject to karma, bound by karma, as the Buddha says. And a Buddha, an enlightened being, is free of karma. Okay, so no longer bound by karma and under the control of karma. Okay, now we can go to the next one. So this is a karma cartoon. So this is a kind of contemporary version of karma. So it's kind of funny that the word karma has entered the English language. It's even in the dictionary. However, there's probably a lot of misunderstanding of karma. I think some people think of it like fate, you know, and it's like, it's your karma to have some experience, and there's nothing you can do to avoid it, nothing you can do to change it. So it's like, you know, carved in stone, fixed, unchangeable. And that's not completely true. It probably is true for people who don't know about karma, who are ignorant of karma. And even though they're ignorant of karma, they're still creating karma and experiencing the results of karma, but it's all happening without awareness. So that's why it's so important for us to learn about karma, understand karma, how it works, and especially knowing what's good karma and what's bad karma, so we make sure that we avoid the bad and do the good as much as we can. And that will enable us to have more control, more choice, and eventually get free of karma, get beyond karma, which is what we can do when we reach enlightenment. Okay, so next slide. There's general characteristics of karma, 4 of these. And these are often explained using the analogy of growing crops, you know, planting seeds and then growing vegetables and crops and so on. So the first general characteristic is that karma is definite, And what that means is that there's a definite correlation between the kind of action we do. Because karma, the word karma literally means action. Karma means action. So when we do an action, we're creating the cause to experience a result later on. And there's a correlation between the kind of action we do and the kind of result that we get. Good actions lead to good experiences, happiness and well-being and good health and all the things we want. Bad actions lead to suffering, problems like sickness and poverty and bad experiences. And so this is similar to nature because, when we want to plant certain kinds of crops or vegetables, we have to get the right seeds. So if you want tomatoes growing in your garden, you have to make sure you get tomato seeds and not broccoli seeds. So there's a definite correlation. A certain type of seed brings about a certain type of plant. And it doesn't happen otherwise. The second one is that karma increases. What that means is that a single action doesn't just bring a single result, but it can bring many results. And these results can occur over a period of time. Some in this lifetime, and some in the next life, and some in later lives in the future. And this is also something we see in nature. One tiny tomato seed can produce a whole plant with lots of tomatoes. And something like an apple seed will, eventually produce a whole tree, and every year, dozens of apples or hundreds of apples. I don't know what's the maximum number of apples that can come off a tree, but anyway, lots of apples. So many results can come from just a single seed. So this happens with karma as well. It multiplies, it increases over time. And then the third general characteristic is that if you don't create the cause, you won't get the result. If you don't plant the seeds, you won't get the crops. Okay, you can't just say, oh, I would like to have some tomatoes growing here in this plot of land, but just wishing for it and maybe praying, please Buddha, please God, may I have some tomatoes here. But if you don't do the work of planting the seeds and watering them and taking care of them, nothing's going to happen. So it's similar with karma. For example, if we want certain results, if we want fortunate rebirth in the next life, we want liberation, we want enlightenment, we have to create the causes. It's not going to happen just by wishing for it. And also on the side of bad karma, if we don't want certain results, we don't want bad experiences happening to us, then we have to make sure we don't create those causes, the causes of those experiences. And the fourth one says, karma that you have created doesn't dissipate, means it doesn't get lost. So once we do an action, it is a bit like planting a seed in the mind. And that seed stays in the mind as the mind travels or continues into the future. And if there's no counter force or something that counteracts that karmic seed, then it will stay in the mind even for many lifetimes or even for thousands of years or millions of years until the right conditions, causes and conditions come together for that seed to ripen and bring about a result. Now there are exceptions to this. There are countermeasures to karma in terms of our bad karma. Like if we kill, we do something negative like killing, it is possible to purify karma. We'll talk about that later, thank goodness. So again, that shows karma isn't fate. It isn't that if you do a negative action, you're going to have to experience some horrible result and there's no way you can avoid it. So that's not true. In fact, they say there's no karma that's so bad that it can't be purified. And we can see that in some of the stories in the Buddhist tradition. For example, Milarepa, the famous yogi who meditated in caves and sang songs and so on. So he did some really bad things in the earlier part of his life. He did black magic and caused the deaths of many people and animals and so on. And then he got really scared about the bad karma that he created and started practicing the Dharma. And he practiced really assiduously, really, really hard, and even managed to become enlightened in that same lifetime. So that shows, yeah, karma can be purified, even murder, even mass murder like that. So yeah, bad karma can be counteracted, but unfortunately, the same can happen with good karma. So good karma, like when we create virtue, we make offerings and donate to charity, do volunteer work, make prayers and so on. So we do good things. So that leaves good karmic seeds in our mind that will bring good results in the future. But it said that certain things can counteract or destroy our good karma. One is anger, getting angry. And depending on who you get angry at and how angry you get and so on, that will be more or less destructive. Anger at a bodhisattva is the worst. So try not to get angry at a bodhisattva. But it's better not to get angry at anybody. So it's really important that we work on our anger and learn to manage our anger and not just let it explode, because one result of anger is that it can destroy our good karmic seeds, which we don't want to do. But it's also said that if we create merit or good karma, and then we dedicate it to enlightenment, that will protect our karma from being destroyed. But other than those exceptions, karmic seeds stay in our mind and will eventually ripen sometime in the future, unless, of course, we completely clear out our karma with higher realizations. So next, so those are the general characteristics of karma. And then specific details of karma. The Buddha taught 10 actions, 10 non-virtues or negative actions, and 10 virtues or positive actions. These are the main ones that we should look out for. We should really try to avoid the 10 non-virtues and practice the 10 virtues. So here's a quotation from the Buddha, again from the Pali Canon, where he mentions these 10. So what is the bad? These are the negative non-virtuous actions. The destruction of life, i.e. killing. And killing in Buddhism is not only human beings, but any kind of being, any kind of sentient being. So as Buddhists, we try our best to refrain from killing animals and even insects as much as we can. And then taking what is not given, that's stealing. So that doesn't need much explanation. However, it also includes not paying money we should pay, like taxes or bus fares or movie fares or whatever. So if you try to sneak into, avoid paying money that you're supposed to pay, that's also included in stealing. And then unwise sexual conduct, that includes any kind of sexual activity that causes suffering, such as adultery. That's the one that's usually mentioned, because that will cause suffering to your partner or the other person's partner. Somebody will suffer as a result of that. It also includes rape, child abuse. There's a number of types of sexual activity that are unwise, unskillful, and harmful, cause suffering. And then, so those first 3 are actions we do with our body, physical actions. The next 4 are actions of speech. False speech is lying, saying things that aren't true. Divisive speech is when we talk in ways that cause disharmony or divisiveness between people. It could be just two people who are friends, and we talk in such a way, like talking to one person about the other person, saying bad things about them, criticizing them, and that causes that person to mistrust or be angry at that other person. So it kind of splits up that friendship. But it could also be two groups of people, two families, two communities, two countries. Okay, so we see this happening all the time in the world. Speech that causes division, that causes anger, disharmony, mistrust, and even war. Okay, so even physical fighting can happen. And then harsh speech would be saying words that are hurtful, like insulting people or pointing out their faults or their imperfections or whatever. So hurtful speech. It can also include swearing, using nasty words. Idle talk is, it can include gossip. We all know that very well, talking about people behind their back. But it can also include talking about politics or fashion or movies or food, things that aren't really important, and yet we can spend a lot of time doing this. So it doesn't sound like it's a very harmful thing to do, but it is in the sense that it can cause us to waste a lot of time. We spend a lot of time doing these things. That time could be better spent doing more constructive things. And also it can increase our afflictive emotions. It can cause us to have more attachment, more desire, or more aversion or mistrust. So it can increase the afflictions in our mind and the minds of others. So we try to use our speech to talk about things that are meaningful and beneficial. But of course, there's situations where, like if you're with your family or friends who are not Buddhists, you need to engage in a certain amount of this, things that they're interested in talking about, and just to keep up a good relationship with them and help them be comfortable. But just try not to go overboard, spend too much time doing this. So those four are actions of speech. And the last three are actions of mind, mental actions. The first is covetousness, which is having desire to own something that belongs to somebody else. And it's more than just desire. You actually have to start thinking about, plotting, planning ways in which you can get that. So if you go to somebody's house, for example, and you see something in their house that's really nice, you think, oh, I'd really like that. And maybe you think of how you can talk to them in such a way that they'll give it to you, or offer to trade something. I'll give you this if you give me that, or whatever. So it's based on desire and attachment, which in turn is based on self-centeredness. I want that for myself. And yeah, just starting to think about how you could get that object for yourself. Maliciousness, the next one, is based on anger or hatred. So if we're angry at somebody and we want them to suffer, we might start thinking of ways that we could make them suffer. We may not act these out, but just letting our mind think and fantasize about things we could say, things we could do that would hurt the other person. Sorry. And then the last one is wrong views. And this means rejecting things that are important for our spiritual practice and our spiritual development, such as karma, like saying, oh, I don't believe in karma. There's no such thing. It's just a lot of rubbish. So it's not just having doubt, being skeptical, but rejecting completely, like closing the door to our mind. I am not even going to think about that. I'm not even going to consider that. It's completely not true. Because if we reject such ideas like karma or the possibility of attaining enlightenment, then we won't even try to practice. We won't even see any meaning, any purpose for engaging in spiritual practice. So those are the 10 actions that the Buddha mentioned. And there's a little brochure from the FPMT that explains these in much more detail. And I've sent it to the center, so you can find that on the materials page of this course. So if you want more details about what's involved in each of these 10 non-virtues, and also the results of them, which we'll get to a little bit later. So those are the 10 non-virtues. And then for the 10 virtues, those involve simply making a conscious effort to refrain from the 10 non-virtues. So the Buddha says, and what is the good? Abstinence from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from unwise sexual conduct, from false speech, from divisive speech, from harsh speech, from idle talk, non-covetousness, goodwill, and right views. So if we recognize that the 10 non-virtuous actions are harmful, they are the cause of suffering for others and also for ourselves, and we feel, I want to avoid doing those things, I don't want to do those things, and we make a conscious effort to not do those things, then that is how we create the 10 virtues. So simply recognizing, yeah, killing is harmful. Nobody wants to die, and if I kill somebody, they suffer, and I don't want that to happen, and I don't want to suffer when that bad karma ripens in the future. So I'm really going to try to stop killing. So if we make that decision and really try our best to avoid killing, then that itself is creating virtue, good karma. So in a way, it's not that difficult to create virtue, to create good karma. I mean, we do have to make some effort, and we have to do it with the right state of mind, the right motivation. But yeah. And on top of that, we can also take precepts. In Buddhism, you don't even have to be a monastic. You can be a lay person and take 5 precepts. And 4 of those involve some of these actions: refraining from killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct. And then the 5th one is intoxicants, which it's not naturally negative to take intoxicants, but if you really want to develop your mind and attain the higher states of mind explained in Buddhism, getting intoxicated interferes with that. It harms our mindfulness and so on. So you have the option of taking any of those 5 precepts when you take refuge and start following the Buddhist path. So again, that's a very helpful way of creating virtue, good karma. Okay, the next slide. So each action that we do is unique based on different factors or different aspects. So it's said that there are 4 main aspects of an action, and if all of these actions are, all of these aspects are present, then the action becomes a complete action, and I'll explain later what that means. So the first is the basis or the object, and that usually refers to the object in relation to which you're doing the action. Like in the case of killing, there's a being that you kill, another being. Or in the case of stealing, the object that you steal. Okay, so there has to actually be an object. People sometimes wonder about killing in a dream. We sometimes have dreams in which we might kill somebody, but that's not really a being that's being killed. It's just an appearance in our mind, but not an actual sentient being. So killing in a dream doesn't count. And then the second is our attitude. What's going on in our mind? And that has 3 parts. The first one is the discrimination, which means correct identification of the object. That sometimes happens that people kill accidentally. They may be, shooting at something and they don't realize it's actually a living being, or they think they're shooting at one person, but in actuality it's somebody else. So the identification of the object needs to be correct. Or in the case of stealing, you might take something thinking it's yours, and then later on you realize, oh no, this isn't my wallet, it's somebody else's. Okay, so that doesn't count. So you have to have a correct identification of what that object is for it to be a complete action. And then the affliction, in order to be a complete action, at least one of the three poisons needs to be present in your mind. The three poisons are anger or hatred. It's the usual motivation for killing. Desire or attachment, that's the usual motivation for stealing. And ignorance. So sometimes actions are done out of ignorance. For example, some people might think there's nothing wrong with stealing. It's completely okay as long as you don't get caught. So that's an example of stealing out of ignorance. And the third is the motivation, meaning you do intend to do it. Because sometimes, again, we do things accidentally. We don't intend. This happens a lot here. You're cleaning up and there's some insects, some little insects or creatures around, and we don't really want to kill them, but we do it accidentally. So that's not a complete act if there's no intention to do it, but it happens accidentally. And the third aspect is the performance or the act, meaning you actually do it. You actually do something. Because sometimes we might think about doing an action. We may even plan and, fantasize about it, but then we never get around to doing it. So it's still negative to indulge in that kind of thought, but it's not a complete action if you don't do it. And then the completion. The fourth point is the completion. So that would differ with each of the 10 non-virtues. So in the case of killing, the completion is when the other being actually dies. We might try to kill somebody and miss or wound them, but they don't actually die. It doesn't become complete. So there's a lot of details here, which you can find in that brochure that I mentioned from the FPMT. It gives different examples as well of the different options of these. So the significance of a complete action, a complete path of action, is that creates the cause for a particular type of rebirth. So if we do an action with all four of these aspects complete, nothing missing, then that becomes the cause for a rebirth. So if it's a negative action, it's the cause to be born in an unfortunate realm. If it's a positive, virtuous action, it's the cause to be born as a human being or as a deva, a fortunate rebirth. Okay, the next one. So other factors that influence karma, making it more or less weighty. Okay, so there's a number of these different factors, and these are mentioned in the book, what's it called? The Easy Path. Yeah. So some actions are heavier or more serious than others, similar to law. In a country, every country has a legal code, and so certain actions are worse than others. Murder is worse than shoplifting, and shoplifting is worse than littering. Okay, so this kind of, gradation of different kinds of crimes that you might commit. So it's similar with karma. And these are factors that determine if an action is more or less heavy or serious. So one is the recipient, meaning the person or object in relation to which you're doing the action. And in the case of a person, if that person is somebody who's been kind to us, For example, our parents. Our parents have been incredibly kind to bring us into this world and take care of us and so on. So any action we do, whether virtuous or non-virtuous in relation to our parents, is going to be more heavy, more serious, more weighty than an action done to a complete stranger who hasn't done so much for us. Okay, so other beings or people would be our teachers, our spiritual teachers, also probably our teachers in school, because they've been kind to us, giving us an education so we can survive in the world. So yeah, people have been kind to us. Anything we do in relation to them, virtuous or non-virtuous, will be heavier. Also, if somebody has realizations, like an Arya, a Bodhisattva, someone who's developed their mind to a higher degree and have actual realizations in their mind, doing something in relation to a person like that will also be heavier, weightier. And the second is motivation, whether it's strong or weak. So an action done with strong hatred, for example, really intense hatred for somebody would be worse than an action done with just mild irritation, or indifference. Okay, so, and on the virtuous side, if we do a virtuous action with really strong compassion, love, bodhicitta, wanting to benefit sentient beings, that will become weightier than just doing it out of obligation. Like sometimes as a Buddhist, we have to do this. Okay, I'll do it. So, but there's not any strong motivation there. The third one is the object. So an example given in the book was in the case of giving, generosity. It said that giving dharma is better than giving material things like food. Because dharma is something that really benefits beings in a long-term sense. Giving food is beneficial, of course, but the benefit will last only a short amount of time, and then it stops. So giving dharma enables that person to learn about the path to enlightenment and start following the path and so on. So it has more long-term, vast benefit. But of course, if some people are hungry, and you just start teaching them the Dharma, that probably wouldn't be very skillful because they wouldn't pay attention. So you have to first give them some food and fill their tummies, and then they'll be able to listen to what you're saying. So there's nothing wrong with giving both. But just in terms of the karmic weight, giving Dharma is more powerful. And the fourth one is basis. And this more has to do with oneself, the one creating the karma. An example given is if we have vows, if we have taken vows or precepts like monastic vows or lay vows, there's also bodhisattva vows. So if you have taken vows, which are taken for life, and you have those in your continuum, they actually become part of our mind, part of our mental continuum, then any action we do becomes weightier. Okay? So if we somebody who has vows is reciting mantras, and next to them is a person who doesn't have vows, and they're also reciting mantras. So they're doing the same practice. The person who has vows in their continuum is actually creating more virtue, more merit. So that's one benefit in taking vows, because some people wonder, well, how about if I just not kill? I just stop killing, but do I have to take a vow? Well, it is more beneficial in terms of the karma we create, the virtue we create. Okay, so there's other factors as well. These aren't the only ones. Another factor that I remember is frequency. How often you do the action. So, for example, a butcher who's killing, or I don't know, in some countries they have butchers, and other countries they have slaughterhouses. So somebody's working in a slaughterhouse and they're killing many times a day, many animals every day, or a fisherman who's killing probably hundreds or thousands of animals in a day. So that becomes heavier than a person who only maybe once a year kills another being. Okay, so doing the action more frequently will also increase the heaviness, the weight of it. And also in the book, it mentions another factor, which is time frame. It said in the teachings that virtuous actions that are done during degenerate times, which is now, we are in a degenerate time, virtuous actions that are done now in this period of time are more powerful, more weighty than the same actions done during a better time, a non-degenerate time. So that's, the teachers are often talking to us about that, and how, yeah, even if we do one tiny thing, keeping one precept or making one offering during this period of time, it's so much more beneficial, creates so much merit. Okay, next is results of karma. So I'm running short of time, so I'll just briefly mention these. And again, there are details of these for each of the 10 non-virtuous actions in that brochure. So the first result is the fully ripened result. And this means a rebirth in a fortunate or unfortunate realm. So again, if we do a complete act of karma with all the 4 factors complete, then it becomes the cause for an actual rebirth, unless it's purified or counteracted in some way. So if we kill with all those 4 factors present, then it's the cause for rebirth in an unfortunate realm, of the 3 lower realms. The second is the result similar to the cause. And there are 2 types of this. One is in terms of experience. So this means that, you know, sometime in the future, we'll have an experience similar to what we did. Like, you know, if we killed another person, destroyed a life, we will have some similar experience, like being killed ourselves, or having a lot of health problems, being sick a lot, medicine not helping. So we're facing experiences similar to what we inflicted on another person. If we saved life instead of killing, if we helped beings to live longer, then we will have an experience like that. We will have a long life and be healthy. And then the second part of that is in terms of tendency, and this is actually said to be the worst result of karma. It means we'll have the tendency to keep doing the action again and again. So we kill, and that sets up a tendency, a habitual tendency to kill again. And it gets easier all the time. So that's really bad news. On the other hand, if we refrain from killing and really try to respect life, take care of life, that sets up that tendency to respect life. So even as a small child, in a future life, we may have that tendency. And then third is the environmental result, and that refers to being born in a certain kind of environment, a certain kind of factors in the environment. So if it's a non-virtuous action, then you could be born in an environment where there's a lot of problems and unpleasant things, and things are unhealthy. But as a result of good karma, virtuous karma, you'll find yourself in a very pleasant environment, where beautiful and pleasing and healthy. Okay, so the next is another karma cartoon. I believe in karma. That means I can do bad things to people all day long, and I assume they deserve it. I don't know if anybody would ever get that idea, but it's possible. Human minds, human brains can come up with amazing things. But what this being, I don't know if it's a person, looks like a dog, is thinking is not thinking of their karma, the karma they're creating. So they're creating bad karma if they do bad things. But fortunately, we can purify bad karma. So just quickly, the last slide is purification. So these are the 4 powers we can use to purify our karma. And the first is regret, feeling sincere, intelligent regret, not guilt, but just realizing that was not a good thing to do. I'm sorry I did that. And then reliance in the Buddhist sense is taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. So renewing our refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and generating the wish to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. If you're not a Buddhist, then there may be something similar in your own spiritual tradition, or if you're not religious at all. I think everybody has values that they regard as important and they try to live by. So you can just remind yourself of your values and put yourself back on track, how you want to live your life. And then the third is remedy, which is doing something virtuous to counteract the negative thing we did. And there's certain practices that are recommended, certain mantras, like the mantra of Vajrasattva, the practice of the 35 Buddhas, reciting the names of 35 Buddhas and prostrating to them. Also sutras, reciting sutras like the Heart Sutra, Vajrakutta Sutra, and so on. Making offerings, putting offerings on an altar to the Buddha. Also giving to sentient beings, donating to charity. So the practice of giving, making images of the Buddha. So there's a practice in Tibetan Buddhism of making these little, they're called tsatsas. You can make them with plaster or clay or different materials, little images of the Buddhas. So those are recommended practices, but it's also said any virtuous action. You can do volunteer work, help somebody who's in need, meditate on loving kindness or on emptiness. So doing something virtuous. The fourth is resolution. This is making the promise to not repeat the same action again. And depending on your ability and depending on the action, you might say, I will never do that again in my whole life, if you can. But if it's something you do habitually, like gossip, getting upset, you wouldn't be able to never do that again. So it's better to make a short-term resolution, like for the next 5 minutes, I will not do that, or the next hour. And then gradually you get used to not doing that action, and you can not do it for longer and longer periods of time. So you can make a vow or a pledge to not do it according to your ability. So this has been a really quick overview of karma, and there's, like I say, lots of details, but you can find more details in that little brochure, as well as in Lam Rim books like Liberation in the Palm of the Hand, much more detail in there. So finally, I wasn't sure whether to give homework or not, but I thought, well, if you want to do it, because we have a break now until July. And when we do start again in July, we'll start on the next section of the Lam Rim, which is the middle scope. We finished the small scope. So you can start reading ahead, the next part of the book. I'd also like you to read an earlier part of the book that we skipped over, which is on the 7-limb practice. Because once we start again, I thought we can do more prayers initially at the start of class. So one of those prayers is the 7-limb practice. And then I also recommend that you do some review and reflection on what we've already learned in the small scope section. So it's just a recommendation, a suggestion for your benefit. It's up to you whether you do it or not. But yeah, the topics from the small scope: the precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, sufferings of the lower realms, refuge and karma. Try not to forget completely what we've learned, because it is the basis for the later sections of the Lam Rim. And then again, if you have any questions about any of these materials, please send them and I'll incorporate them in future talks. So we'll stop there for today and do a dedication, just a mental dedication of the merit, the positive energy we've created from spending this time together, having a brief look at a very complex subject, karma, but it's a very, very important one we need to learn more about and review again and again, and then put into practice in our life. So by this merit, this positive energy, may it help our own minds to progress along the path to enlightenment, eventually becoming enlightened, to be able to help all living beings. And may we benefit all living beings as much as we can from this time on until we reach enlightenment. Thank you. See you next time in July.